Jesus' Miracles Explained. Welcome back to our channel. Today we're diving deep into one of the most fascinating and debated aspects of Christian history, the miracles of Jesus Christ. Whether you're a believer, a skeptic, or simply curious about these extraordinary events that have shaped human civilization for over 2,000 years, this comprehensive exploration will examine these miraculous accounts from multiple perspectives. Throughout history, the miracles attributed to Jesus have been sources of faith, wonder, and intense scholarly debate. From healing the sick to walking on water, from feeding thousands with a few loaves and fish to raising the dead, these events have captured human imagination and sparked countless discussions about the nature of reality, faith, and the divine. Today, we'll examine 37 specific miracles recorded in the 4 Gospels of the New Testament. We'll explore not just what happened, but the cultural context, the symbolic meanings, and the various interpretations that scholars, theologians, and historians have offered over the centuries. We'll look at these events through the lens of faith, historical analysis, and even modern scientific inquiry. Let's begin with perhaps the most numerous category of Jesus' miracles, the healing miracles. These accounts make up roughly half of all recorded miracles and reveal a consistent pattern of compassion and restoration. The Gospel of Matthew tells us about Jesus healing a leper, a man who was considered ritually unclean and banned from society. In ancient Jewish culture, leprosy wasn't just a physical ailment, it was a social death sentence. When Jesus reached out and touched this man, saying, "Be clean," he wasn't just healing a disease. He was restoring a human being to his community, his family, and his dignity. The text emphasizes that Jesus touched the man before healing him, breaking social taboos and demonstrating that no one is beyond the reach of compassion. Then there's the remarkable account of the centurion's servant. A Roman military officer, a representative of the occupying force, approaches Jesus with a request that astounds everyone present. He asks Jesus to heal his servant, but then says something extraordinary. "Lord, I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. But only speak the word, and my servant will be healed." This centurion, a man of authority who understood command structures, recognized a different kind of authority in Jesus. The healing happened at a distance, demonstrating what believers interpret as the power of faith transcending physical boundaries. One of the most dramatic healing miracles involves a paralyzed man whose friends literally tore apart a roof to lower him down to Jesus. Picture this scene, a house so packed with people that there's no way to get inside. For friends, determined to help their paralyzed companion, climb onto the roof, remove the tiles, and lower their friend down on a mat. Jesus, seeing their faith, not only heals the man's paralysis but also forgives his sins, claiming an authority that shocked the religious leaders present. The healing of the woman with the hemorrhage presents another fascinating case. This woman had suffered from bleeding for 12 years, making her ritually unclean and socially isolated. In a crowd, she touched the edge of Jesus' garment, believing that even this minimal contact would heal her. Jesus felt power leave him and turned to find her. Rather than being angry about being touched by someone considered unclean, he praised her faith and sent her away in peace. Perhaps one of the most emotionally powerful healing miracles involves Jairus' daughter. Jairus, a synagogue leader, falls at Jesus' feet begging him to heal his dying 12-year-old daughter. While they're traveling to his house, messengers arrive with devastating news: the girl has died. Jesus tells the grieving father, "Don't be afraid, just believe." When they arrive at the house, Jesus takes the girl's hand and says, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." She immediately stands and walks around, leaving everyone amazed. The healing of the man born blind presents not just a miracle of physical restoration but a profound theological statement. When the disciples ask whether the man's blindness was caused by his sin or his parents' sin, Jesus rejects both explanations, saying instead that this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. After making mud with saliva and applying it to the man's eyes, Jesus tells him to wash in the pool of Siloam. The man obeys and receives his sight, leading to intense controversy with the religious authorities who question how someone could perform such signs if he were truly a sinner. The nature miracles of Jesus present some of the most spectacular and challenging accounts in the gospel narratives. These events seem to defy the very laws of physics and natural order as we understand them. The feeding of the 5,000 stands as one of the most widely attested miracles, appearing in all 4 Gospels. Picture this massive crowd following Jesus to a remote area. As evening approaches, the disciples suggest sending the people away to buy food in nearby villages. Instead, Jesus takes 5 small barley loaves and 2 fish from a young boy's lunch. After giving thanks, he begins distributing the food. Somehow, impossibly, there's enough not just to feed everyone but to fill 12 baskets with leftovers. This miracle has been interpreted symbolically as Jesus being the bread of life, practically as a lesson in sharing and community, and literally as a supernatural multiplication of matter. The account of Jesus walking on water pushes the boundaries of natural possibility even further. The disciples are rowing across the Sea of Galilee in the early morning hours when they see a figure walking toward them on the water's surface. Their initial terror turns to amazement when they recognize Jesus. Peter, ever impulsive, asks to walk on water too and actually succeeds until doubt overcomes faith and he begins to sink. This miracle has been interpreted as Jesus demonstrating mastery over chaos, as the sea often represented chaos and disorder in ancient Near Eastern thought. The calming of the storm provides another dramatic example of Jesus' apparent authority over natural forces. The disciples are crossing the lake when a furious squall suddenly develops, threatening to swamp their boat. Jesus, remarkably, is sleeping peacefully in the stern. The terrified disciples wake him, crying, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" Jesus stands up, rebukes the wind and says to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Immediately, the wind dies down and the lake becomes completely calm. The disciples are left wondering, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." The cursing of the fig tree presents a more troubling nature miracle for many readers. Jesus approaches a fig tree looking for fruit but finds only leaves. He curses the tree, saying, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." By the next day, the tree has withered from the roots. This miracle has been interpreted as a symbolic judgment on Israel's spiritual barrenness, a lesson about the power of faith, or even a demonstration that Jesus' power could destroy as well as create. The miraculous catch of fish occurs twice in the Gospel accounts, once at the beginning of Jesus' ministry and once after his resurrection. In both cases, experienced fishermen have worked all night without catching anything. Jesus instructs them to cast their nets on the other side of the boat or in deeper water. The resulting catch is so enormous that their nets begin to break and their boats nearly sink from the weight. These miracles served as powerful metaphors for the disciples' future mission of being fishers of men. The turning of water into wine at the wedding in Cana holds special significance as Jesus' first recorded miracle in John's Gospel. When the wedding hosts run out of wine, a social disaster in that culture, Jesus' mother brings the problem to his attention. Initially reluctant, Jesus eventually instructs servants to fill 6 large stone water jars with water. When they draw some out to take to the master of the banquet, it has become wine, and not just any wine, but wine so good that the master comments on its exceptional quality. This miracle has been seen as a sign of the new covenant, the joy of God's kingdom, and Jesus' care for human celebration and community. Among all of Jesus' miracles, the resurrection miracles stand apart as the most profound and challenging to human understanding. These aren't just healings or demonstrations of power over nature. They represent victories over death itself, humanity's ultimate enemy. The raising of Jairus' daughter, which we touched on earlier, presents the first of these extraordinary events. When Jesus arrives at the house, professional mourners are already wailing, and everyone is convinced the 12-year-old girl is dead. Jesus clears the room except for the parents and his closest disciples, takes the girl's hand, and speaks to her in Aramaic, Talitha koum, which means, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." She immediately stands and walks around. Jesus, remarkably practical even in this supernatural moment, tells them to give her something to eat. The raising of the widow's son at Nain demonstrates Jesus' compassion for human grief. As Jesus approaches the town gate with his disciples, they encounter a funeral procession. A widow is burying her only son, which in that culture meant she faced not just emotional devastation but economic ruin with no male to provide for her. Jesus, moved with compassion, tells her not to weep. He touches the coffin, stops the procession, and says, "Young man, I say to you, get up." The dead man sits up and begins to speak. Jesus gives him back to his mother, and news of this miracle spreads throughout the region. But perhaps the most dramatic resurrection miracle involves Lazarus of Bethany, a close friend of Jesus. When Lazarus falls ill, his sisters Mary and Martha send word to Jesus, but he deliberately delays his journey. By the time Jesus arrives, Lazarus has been dead for 4 days and is already buried in a tomb. Martha meets Jesus and expresses both faith and frustration. "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Jesus' response has become one of the most famous declarations in Christian theology: "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die." At the tomb, Jesus weeps, showing his deep humanity even in the face of his divine power. He orders the stone rolled away from the tomb entrance. Martha objects, saying there will be a terrible odor after 4 days, but Jesus insists. Standing before the open tomb, Jesus prays aloud, thanking his Father and asking that those present might believe. Then he calls out in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" The dead man emerges, still wrapped in burial cloths, very much alive. These resurrection miracles serve as previews or foreshadowing of what Christians believe was Jesus' own resurrection, which they consider the ultimate miracle and the foundation of their faith. Each of these events challenged the finality of death and offered hope that death itself might not have the final word in human existence. Understanding Jesus' miracles requires looking beyond the surface events to explore their deeper symbolic and theological significance. Throughout Christian history, scholars and believers have found layers of meaning that speak to fundamental human concerns about suffering, hope, community, and the nature of divine power. The healing miracles consistently reveal themes of restoration and wholeness. When Jesus heals the blind, it's not just about physical sight but about spiritual insight and the ability to truly see God's work in the world. The healing of the deaf speaks to the importance of hearing and responding to God's word. The healing of the lame represents not just physical mobility but spiritual freedom and the ability to walk in God's ways. Many of these healing miracles also address issues of social inclusion and exclusion. Lepers, tax collectors, foreigners, women with hemorrhages, and others considered outcasts or unclean are consistently welcomed and restored by Jesus. This pattern suggests that the miracles weren't just individual acts of compassion but demonstrations of a new social order where traditional boundaries of clean and unclean, worthy and unworthy, are transcended. The nature miracles often symbolize Jesus' authority over chaos and disorder. In ancient Near Eastern thought, the sea represented primordial chaos, the forces that threaten to undo creation itself. When Jesus walks on water or calms storms, he's demonstrating mastery over these chaotic forces. The feeding miracles recall God's provision of manna in the wilderness, suggesting that Jesus is the new Moses, leading people not just to a promised land but to spiritual nourishment and satisfaction. The multiplication of loaves and fish has been interpreted as a prefiguring of the Eucharist or communion, where bread and wine become spiritual nourishment for believers. The abundance of food, with baskets left over, speaks to God's generous provision and the idea that divine resources are inexhaustible. The resurrection miracles carry the most profound theological weight, representing victory over humanity's greatest enemy, death itself. But they also symbolize spiritual rebirth, the possibility of new life even in the face of apparent hopelessness. The raising of Lazarus, in particular, serves as a dramatic demonstration of Jesus' claim to be the resurrection and the life. These miracles also reveal the importance of faith in accessing divine power. Again and again, Jesus emphasizes the role of faith in healing and restoration. "Your faith has healed you," he tells the woman with the hemorrhage. To Jairus, he says, "Don't be afraid, just believe." This suggests that the miracles aren't just arbitrary displays of power, but responses to human trust and openness to divine intervention. The historical study of Jesus' miracles presents unique challenges that have engaged scholars for centuries. These accounts exist at the intersection of faith, history, literature, and anthropology, making them complex subjects for academic inquiry. From a historical perspective, several factors support the authenticity of the miracle traditions. First, these accounts appear in multiple independent sources within the New Testament, including the 4 Gospels and some references in Paul's letters. The criterion of multiple attestation suggests that these stories weren't later inventions but were part of the earliest Christian traditions about Jesus. Second, many of the miracle accounts contain what scholars call embarrassing details that later Christians would have been unlikely to invent. For example, Jesus sometimes appears to struggle with certain healings. He occasionally uses methods like spitting and making mud that might seem undignified, and he sometimes expresses surprise at people's lack of faith. These details suggest authentic historical memory rather than idealized later creation. Third, the miracle traditions are deeply embedded in the Jewish context of first-century Palestine. The methods Jesus uses, the expectations people have, and the reactions of both supporters and opponents all reflect accurate knowledge of that time and place. This contextual authenticity supports the early origin of these traditions. However, historians also note significant challenges in evaluating these accounts. Ancient biography followed different conventions than modern historical writing, often including miraculous elements to highlight a person's significance. Similar miracle stories were told about other religious figures of the time, including Jewish rabbis and Greco-Roman philosophers and healers. Some scholars have proposed naturalistic explanations for some of the miracles. The healing miracles might reflect psychosomatic conditions that could respond to the power of suggestion and the presence of a charismatic healer. The feeding of the 5,000 might have involved people sharing food they had brought, inspired by a young boy's generous example. The walking on water might have occurred during an unusual low tide or involved walking on a floating piece of debris. Other scholars emphasize the importance of understanding these accounts within their ancient Mediterranean context, where the boundary between the natural and supernatural was understood differently than in our modern scientific worldview. Healing, in particular, was understood to involve spiritual as well as physical dimensions, and the success of a healer often depended as much on their spiritual authority as on their medical knowledge. Archaeological discoveries have shed interesting light on some gospel accounts. Excavations at Capernaum have revealed a first-century synagogue beneath the later stone structure, providing context for Jesus' ministry there. The Pool of Siloam, where Jesus sent the blind man to wash, has been excavated and confirms the Gospel's description of its location and construction. Medical perspectives on the healing miracles have evolved significantly. Some conditions described in the Gospels, such as epilepsy, might have been misunderstood as demon possession in ancient times. Certain forms of paralysis can be psychosomatic and might respond to psychological healing. However, other healing accounts, such as the restoration of sight to the man born blind or the healing of withered limbs, would require genuine miraculous intervention if taken literally. Modern biblical scholarship has also explored the literary and theological functions of the miracle stories within the gospel narratives. These accounts aren't just historical reports but are carefully crafted stories designed to convey theological truths about Jesus' identity and mission. The miracles serve as signs that point beyond themselves to deeper spiritual realities. Some scholars emphasize the social and political dimensions of the miracles. In a world where disease and disability were often seen as divine punishment, Jesus' healing ministry challenged existing power structures and offered hope to the marginalized. The feeding miracles, in particular, have been interpreted as acts of social justice, demonstrating God's concern for the hungry and dispossessed. Contemporary scholarship increasingly recognizes that the historical question, "Did these miracles actually happen?" may not be the most important question for understanding their significance. These stories have shaped human consciousness, inspired countless acts of compassion and healing, and continue to offer hope to millions of people worldwide, regardless of their historical factuality. In our contemporary world, the miracles of Jesus continue to generate diverse interpretations and applications that speak to modern concerns and sensibilities. From a scientific perspective, the miracles challenge our understanding of natural law and causation. While some scholars propose naturalistic explanations, others argue that genuine miracles, by definition, transcend natural explanation. Quantum physics has introduced concepts of uncertainty and observer effect that some find compatible with miraculous intervention, though most scientists remain skeptical of supernatural explanations for extraordinary events. Psychologically, the healing miracles have inspired modern understanding of the mind-body connection and the placebo effect. Research has demonstrated that belief, expectation, and social support can have genuine physiological effects, lending credibility to at least some aspects of faith healing. However, the most dramatic gospel miracles, such as raising the dead or instantly healing congenital conditions, remain beyond any known psychological mechanism. In medical missions and healthcare ministry, the healing miracles continue to inspire Christians to combine spiritual care with medical treatment. Many Christian hospitals and relief organizations see their work as following Jesus' example of healing the sick and caring for the marginalized. This integration of faith and medicine has led to significant advances in global health, particularly in underserved communities. Environmentally, some modern interpreters find in the nature miracles a call to recognize the interconnectedness of all creation and humanity's responsibility for environmental stewardship. If Jesus demonstrated authority over natural forces, perhaps his followers are called to exercise responsible care for the natural world rather than exploitation or domination. Ethically, the miracles raise questions about suffering, divine intervention, and human responsibility. If God can heal miraculously, why doesn't healing always occur? How should believers balance faith in divine healing with responsible medical care? These questions continue to challenge theologians and pastoral counselors. The resurrection miracles speak powerfully to contemporary concerns about death, meaning, and hope. In a secular age where death is often seen as final extinction, these accounts offer the possibility that consciousness and personality might survive bodily death. Even for those who interpret them symbolically rather than literally, these stories provide powerful metaphors for renewal, transformation, and the possibility of new beginnings even in seemingly hopeless situations. The miracles of Jesus remain among the most fascinating and challenging aspects of Christian tradition. Whether approached from perspectives of faith, history, science, or literary analysis, these accounts continue to provoke thought, inspire hope, and generate discussion more than 2,000 years after they were first recorded. For believers, these miracles serve as signs of divine love and power, demonstrations that God cares about human suffering and has the ability to intervene in extraordinary ways. They provide hope that death is not final, that healing is possible, and that the natural order itself is subject to higher spiritual realities. For historians, these accounts provide windows into first-century Palestinian Judaism, early Christian communities, and the development of religious tradition. They illustrate how extraordinary experiences are remembered, transmitted, and interpreted across cultures and centuries. For skeptics, these stories raise important questions about evidence, testimony, and the relationship between faith and reason. They challenge us to consider what we accept as possible and why, and how we evaluate claims that transcend ordinary experience. Perhaps most importantly, regardless of one's position on their historical factuality, these miracle stories have demonstrably changed the world. They have inspired countless acts of compassion, healing, and service. They have provided hope to the suffering, comfort to the grieving, and motivation for social justice. They have influenced art, literature, music, and culture in ways that continue to shape human civilization. As we conclude this exploration, the miracles of Jesus invite us to consider fundamental questions about reality, possibility, suffering, and hope. Whether we approach them with faith, skepticism, or simple curiosity, they remind us that human experience may be far richer and more mysterious than our everyday assumptions suggest. Thank you for joining me on this journey through these remarkable accounts. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What aspects of these miracles do you find most compelling or challenging? How do you interpret these ancient stories in our modern world? If this deep dive into Jesus' miracles has sparked your curiosity, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss our latest content. We have an entire series planned exploring the historical Jesus, early Christianity, and the intersection of faith and scholarship. Coming up next week, we'll be examining the parables of Jesus and their hidden meanings that scholars have uncovered. The week after that, we're diving into the archaeological evidence for biblical events. And if you're interested in comparative religion, we have fascinating episodes planned on miracle accounts from other world religions and how they compare to the Christian tradition. Your engagement truly helps this channel grow and reach more people who are curious about these profound questions. So please, like this video if it provided value, share it with friends who might find it interesting, and let me know in the comments what topics you'd like us to explore next. For those wanting to dive even deeper, I've put together a reading list of the best scholarly books on Jesus' miracles in the description below, along with links to the archaeological sites and museums we mentioned. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and remember that the most important journeys are often the ones that challenge us to think in new ways. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.